First thing I want to talk about is lettering and graffiti. We already went through our slideshow, which should be in the same project folder, the graffiti project. If you want to go back and look at that slideshow, it kind of gives you an idea of what graffiti is and what it looks like and all the different styles that it has. What we are going to do for this project is we're actually going to be creating our first name, middle name, or nickname in graffiti letters. It just can't be our last name because due to some confidentiality reasons, we got to keep our last name out of our artwork. So we're going to keep it safe, and we're just going to roll with our, like I said, our first name, middle name, or nickname. So what I want to do first is I just want to talk about the basic component of letters. Okay, first letter being A. Okay, and this is just going to be a quick example. So for this letter, if I want to take this two-dimensional letter, this letter is made up of 3 lines. Okay, it's made up of 1, 2, 3. Pretty simple. If I want to take this letter and I want to make it, let's use a different utensil. Let's use green. If I want to make this a box letter, or also known as a bubble letter, which a lot of you are already pretty good at, I can make it into a box letter or a bubble letter. From here, there's a couple things I want to point out. The structure of this letter. What gives it balance? What gives it that nice, clean, professional look? Excuse me. If you were to go on to Google Docs, Microsoft Word, any sort of program where you're going to be typing in letters or maybe different types of fonts, every font looks the same. What that means is there is a structure and a professional design to each letter. Here's how it starts. If you were to draw an A correctly, okay, a nice neat A, all of these lines should actually be straight and parallel to each other. Makes sense? That way, so when I go in, and let's just go ahead and shade this in with purple. If I shade in the letter A, with pink, it'll kind of jump out at you and show you pretty much how this letter is constructed within its components. Okay, so that's the letter A, and that's pretty simple. Letters like Q and S and maybe G, those letters are going to be a little bit tricky because there's a lot of curved lines, and it's hard to get those nice and consistent, but we'll get to that. All right, so that's just a very simplified version of the letter A. If I were to take that same letter, let's just say I do this. Maybe instead of doing straight lines, maybe I add a little bit of curve to it, okay? Get a little crazy. So, from here, take this pink highlighter, give it a top. Maybe the top and bottom aren't going to be perfectly parallel. But what I want to do, what I want to make sure I do, is I want to make sure that I keep a similar structure to my letter. That got a little bit crazy there. Clean that up. Okay. So I have a little bit of structure here going on. Now, if I go in and I fill in my structure and I go in and clean up all my lines and everything's looking how I want it, maybe alter things a little bit along the way. Now I have more of a graffiti type letter A. Okay, and I'll go in with a green highlighter just to show you what I meant from that previous step. This line that I'm making with the green runs pretty much on the same path as that line on the outside. And this line I'm drawing with the green runs similar to the line inside of the A. And these lines are still running pretty consistent. So there is a structural balance to this letter A. Even though it doesn't have straight lines, it still has a nice balance to it, and it's going to work out well for your project. What I want to do next is I'm going to take a new piece of paper, and I'm just going to show you kind of how to get started. Whenever you set up a drawing, you want to give yourself a nice line, and this is just going to show you the direction you want to draw in. If you want to draw your letters diagonally, then you can set it up just like this, and you can start by just creating all your letters on that line, just to give it that diagonal effect. For this case, we're going to draw this line horizontally right across the paper, and then I'm going to give myself a vertical line just to show me the balance within my paper. Every time you start a drawing, you want to have a composition to it, okay? Composition is important because it's the arrangement of your entire drawing. If I start doing letters over here and I don't know where I'm going to end, I might get to the other side of my paper and realize that, oh shoot, I have to like scrunch in this letter over here, or maybe I have like too much space and it looks kind of off balance. So I want to come up with a composition that is balanced. Okay, a balanced composition. So what I do is I'm going to sketch out my vertical and horizontal line. The next step is I can figure out if I'm drawing 4 letters, I want to make sure I can either do these with just kind of quick rectangles to kind of show me where my letters are going to go, or I can just kind of map it out with circles. Doesn't matter. In this case, let's just do rectangles. I'm just sketching this out, figuring out, okay, if I'm going to do A, B, C, D, I want my letters to kind of fall within this frame. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start off with the letter A. Now, what I'm going to do for this example is I'm going to use a reference to guide me through this sort of drawing. Okay, so I'm using this reference sheet on my iPad to get myself started. So the first letter I'm going to do is the letter A. And I'm going to draw this letter A with a Sharpie just to kind of show you how it works. And that letter A, clearly not perfect, but for the sake of this demonstration, it'll work. Once you get done with your letter A, okay, and you can do this in pencil, you can make sure that all your components match up, right? This line and this line should be parallel. This line and this line should run on the same track. This line should be good. Okay, once you get past that point, your next letter, what I want to see you try is I want to see you try to overlap in some way your 4 letters. Okay, so A and B. Now, this doesn't overlap by that much, it just overlaps by a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to make sure my C overlaps my B by about the same amount as my last 2 letters overlapped. So now I have my letter C. My letter D, I'm going to have that overlap about the same amount, not too much. Is it exactly like that reference? No. But the overall concept of graffiti lettering is that you just take each letter, you balance it out, you try to give it roughly the same size. Does D have to be exactly the same height as C? No. But it also may go down a little bit further than C does. Letter A might go down further than B, but letter B might go up a little bit higher than A. So your letters can sit on different levels. If you want to exaggerate this even further, you could have B up to maybe here, and you could have A down to here. And you can stagger it that way. It's really all up to your creativity. So, graffiti. The main thing with graffiti is there aren't really too many rules to graffiti. you can roll with this however you want. Once you get your basic structure set up, you can actually take an eraser. You can erase over all those sketch marks that you originally had, get rid of them, and then you have a nice clean drawing. From here, I want to talk about, really quick, let's see if this Sharpie works. Let's talk about drop shadows. Okay, drop shadows are really important when you talk about graffiti. With graffiti, I'm going to take the letter A and just kind of show you how drop shadows work. With drop shadows, you have to have some sort of light source. Now this light source is all the way up here. Picture this as just like a light bulb. And the light bulb is shining in this direction. Now, whenever you have a shadow, you have to have some sort of light source. For this case, we're only going to use one light source. The light source is traveling in this direction, which means my shadow is also going to travel in this direction. So what that means is whenever you do a shadow, a drop shadow, you can only do it on two sides of your letter. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this right edge of my letter A and I'm going to give it a shadow. I'm going to take the right side of this leg of the A and give it a shadow. And I'm going to do this for the rest of my letter A. When I go in and shade it in, it should help you visualize how exactly that shadow works and how it affects that letter A. It makes it look a little bit more realistic, makes it look a little bit more emphasized, gives it a little bit more contrast, and it starts to make it jump out. For the letter B, I'm going to have a shadow all the way around to about here. I don't want to take it up any further because technically the shadow is going to start back up here. So, shade this in. And you got your drop shadow. Okay, moving on to the C. If it helps you to draw these separate lines coming down, you can do that. Probably going to have a shadow here. I'm going to have a shadow here. This part's a little tricky. Shade that in. And you have your shadow. Now, shadows are a little bit tricky because there are going to be some areas where you're not quite sure how it fits in behind the letter or underneath the letter or beside the letter. But for the most part, as long as you follow the principle of it only being on two sides of your letter, in this case it's going to be on the right and on the bottom, it should work out for you in the end. Okay, A, B, C, and D. So, with that said, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that the letters are structurally sound. Okay? This line would follow the path of this line. This line is going to follow the path of this line. These lines match up. Okay, so hopefully you get the point. The structure of the letters is important because it gives it balance. It gives it the same thickness all the way through. And that's basically the setup. Now the cool part about graffiti is I could continue to work on this. I could basically just say, I'm going to add some sort of runny effect on the bottom. And I could do that, which looks kind of cool. I could add little bubbles, all different shapes and sizes. I could make a cloud going over the top. Cool. And I could actually go in and shade this in. What I want you to do once you get your outline drawn and all of your little special effects around the outside is I want you to start looking at different types of graffiti. Because what you'll see is that there's a bunch of different types of styles, effects, and all these unique artists are different in their own way. So, for that, this demonstration is complete. Hopefully it helps you out. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to message me on Polaris. Feel free to email me. And also feel free to ask me in class. Okay, good luck.